Hello and welcome to Learning with Lulu. In today's video we are going to be doing a chapter summary of chapter 6 in The Great Gatsby. So in chapter 6 we learn exactly what Jay Gatsby's true backstory is. The narration of this by Nick is written such that he is reflecting on these past experiences. So the Nick narrating already has known since the beginning what Jay Gatsby's true origin story is, and he takes this chapter now to tell the reader, us, what it is. The chapter begins with rumors about Gatsby continuing to circulate, continuing to be spread. So much so that randomly one day a journalist shows up at Gatsby's doorstep and is asking if he has any comment, and the journalist doesn't really know what they're digging for, but they're hoping that just their presence and them asking that kind of question would maybe get Gatsby to open up. But alas, that they don't get an interview, but it definitely shows how much talk is going around about Gatsby. And it's now at this point that Nick halts his narration and tells us where James Gatz actually originated. So he was born in a farm town, on a farm in North Dakota, and he did attend college or university in Minnesota at, I believe, St. Olaf School. And in order to pay his tuition there, he worked as a janitor, and he hated that job. So he didn't continue there because he hated working as a janitor in order to pay his tuition. And so then the following summer, I believe it said, he fished salmon and dug for clams in one of the Great Lakes in Lake Superior. And it was there that he became acquainted with a very wealthy man who was like a copper mogul, someone who had made a lot of money associated with copper. But he was fishing salmon, digging for clams, and a major impending storm was coming up, and there was this yacht out on the lake, so he swam out to warn them. No, he didn't swim out to him. I think he took like a little dinghy, a little boat out to him to warn him. And this Cody, this very wealthy Cody, really took to James Gatz and took him in. He had him be his assistant on the boat. One of his jobs was when Cody got into a drinking binge. One of our now Jay Gatsby's jobs was to just kind of protect him from himself, keep him safe. And naturally you can see how that then would lead into him deciding that he never wanted to be a drinker. It definitely showed him the dangers of alcohol. And I believe it was this Cody who gave James Gatz this new identity as Jay Gatsby. So just in the sense that his identity, realizing that he loves a life of luxury, he also is given a new name. So it's almost like a rechristening of who he is. And so, as I said, he's this Cody's personal assistant, and they traveled to like other parts of the world on this yacht. It's just a very comfortable life for a while. Now, this Cody's attachment to Jay Gatsby was genuine, to the point that when he died, he left him $25,000. Now, this Cody's mistress prevented Jay Gatsby from acquiring that, but he now had this dream. He now had this drive to make this a reality for himself, to acquire his own wealth and possessions and life of luxury. that's Jay Gatsby's true origins. His real name is James Gatz, from North Dakota, went for a time to a school in Minnesota. That didn't stick because he hated working as a janitor to pay his tuition. So instead he was working on Lake Superior, catching salmon, digging for clams, rowed out to warn this wealthy man on his yacht, and then was taken in and shown this whole new side of life. So then back to present day narration, present day being, when this book is taking place, which is now about 100 years ago. But Nick tells us that he, for several weeks, doesn't actually see Gatsby or Daisy since he helped reunite them at his house. So Nick is like, well, I'm gonna go visit Gatsby. So he goes over, and at Gatsby's house, lo and behold, is Tom Buchanan. And that surprises Nick for obvious reasons. Gatsby and Daisy are engaging in an affair, and Daisy's husband, who's also unfaithful, is now at Gatsby's house. Tom is still unaware, but you do start to see a little bit of suspicion on Tom's part, or at least just dislike of Gatsby. Gatsby definitely behaves somewhat awkwardly around them. There's this one point where, so Tom's there with this couple whose last name is Sloan or something. They had been out riding and they just stopped in to refresh themselves, to get a drink. And Gatsby, he's being very polite. He says, why don't you stay for dinner? And they refuse. And you can tell that they're not exactly comfortable around him, a little annoyed with him, which I think is just kind of ridiculous. It's like, you stopped in at his house for a drink. Anyway. And so, almost to just be cordial, but they're not really being sincere, they ask him to join them for dinner. Gatsby accepts their invitation, not realizing it was insincere. Arrangements are just kind of made in that way. Tom expresses some criticism of Daisy visiting this place, of her. I think at this point, Tom is aware that Daisy knows Gatsby, because Gatsby awkwardly, again, says I know your wife, Daisy. And Tom is a little critical of her having any sort of association with him, because you can tell Tom doesn't really like this West Egg popular wealthy guy. That scene concludes, and then we are told about Gatsby's next party, and Tom and Daisy actually show up to it. And Daisy, you can tell, is not having a good time. Tom is definitely not having a good time. And Nick is kind of seeing how, with just so much going on around them at these parties, how it can kind of be overbearing and a lot to take in. Like, it's too much. While at the party, Tom talks about how he thinks Gatsby has all of his money from bootlegging, which upsets Daisy, and she says no, he has all his money from drugstore chains. And there's just conflict and not having a good time at a really, as you can imagine, like, overstimulating party. Especially if you're already not in a good mood, then it would be like too much. So Tom and Daisy leave the party. Gatsby comes and finds Nick, and he's upset because Daisy obviously wasn't having a good time at his big party, these parties that he's purely been throwing just to try and catch her attention and hope that she'll show up at one. And now she's shown up at one and she didn't have a good time. And Nick tries to remind Gatsby that things can't be the way that they were back in Louisville, but that's what Gatsby wants. He wants things to be the way they were. He wants Daisy to live up to this ideal he's been creating of her. Gatsby's insistent that he can recreate the past, that he can rekindle or recapture those exact same feelings that they shared before. completely disregarding that Daisy has lived any amount of life since then. It's like, I think one of the things that shocks me about this book is Daisy and Tom have a child. They have a 3-year-old daughter. And the fact that she is so disregarded and overlooked in Gatsby's account of any of this just goes to show how out of touch he is with the present, the now, what Daisy might actually want. And I don't want to assign any sort of maternalness to a character who, as far as we can tell, is very detached from the raising of her daughter. But you would think that her daughter having some sort of play into Gatsby's assessment of Daisy rejoining him in his life, you would think that it would play some part, but it obviously doesn't. He just wants the Daisy who was this wealthy maiden back in Louisville, and he wants to be her counterpart in that. And he believes that money and wealth and doing what he's doing can recapture that. Which, oddly, as I'm saying all of this, it's like he already has re-met her and he's still struggling. And this is where it comes into play, where I feel like this chapter kind of is an example of the phrase, pleasure is in anticipation. Meaning, once you actually think of it this way, you're gonna make brownies, and the thought of eating that fudgy brownie is just so wonderful, and it's great in your imagination. So you are anticipating how good it's gonna taste as you make the brownie batter, and as you pour it into the dish, and then as you put it in the oven, you're just imagining how good it's going to taste. And then as it's cooking in the oven, the air is full of that wonderful brownie scent. Hopefully you're following this. And then you're anticipating this thing that you know is going to be so good. And then the brownies are finally done. You don't even wait for them to cool off. You just get a glass of like nice, fresh, cool milk, and you sit down and you eat some of that brownie. It's delicious, and then it's over. The anticipation's done, you move on. The problem for Gatsby is Daisy has been that brownie, and the smell of it in the oven, and the preparing and planning and doing everything in order to prepare for that moment when you get the brownie, that has been sustaining Gatsby. And now he's tasted the brownie, the affair is happening, and it's almost like he doesn't realize he's done, but she's not living up. You can't continue to eat it over and over again in hopes that you have that same feeling the anticipation gave you. Hopefully that analogy works. If it doesn't, let me know. If it does make sense to you, also let me know. But that's kind of how I think of it. Gatsby's pleasure has been in anticipating and planning and trying to draw Daisy in, and now he's reeled her in, and she's not what he has been creating her in his mind to be. So what's he to do? That's pretty much chapter 6 for us. Again, Nick tells us his actual origin story, Jay Gatsby's actual origin story, and then we see Tom at Gatsby's house. Tom's uncomfortable with him, has not discovered the affair yet, but isn't really liking Gatsby. Then they go to this party. Nobody has a good time. And we learn that Gatsby does believe he can recreate the past if he just plays his cards right. So there you have it. I hope this video comes in useful. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, share, and like this video, and keep coming back for more content. Thanks for watching. Bye.